Hello, and welcome to episode 5 of Thinking Deliberately. And this is about the myth of personality. And I even have videos on YouTube for this one, so you can check those out. In the last few episodes, we've been building a different way of looking at the self. We started with the idea that the way you think may be the problem. Then we looked at the self as something constructed, not fixed. Then we introduced dynamic intelligence, awareness becoming choice in a moment. And in the last episode, we explored the awareness quotient, the level of awareness from which you construct yourself, your context, and your response. Today, I want to offend one of the most popular ideas in modern psychology and self-development: personality. Or more precisely, the way we worship personality. Because somewhere along the way, we started treating personality labels as if they were explanations, like I'm an introvert, or I'm an empath, or I'm a type 3. Well, I'm ENTJ. I'm highly sensitive. I am a natural leader. I'm a people pleaser. Well, actually, I'm analytical, and I'm creative. I'm just not good with conflict. And these labels can feel useful. They give us a language, they give us recognition, they give us the little hint or a little hit of relief that comes from saying, that explains me. But here is the problem. A label can describe a pattern without explaining the construction of that pattern. It can name what you tend to do. It does not necessarily tell you how you are constructing yourself in the moment. And it certainly doesn't free you. In fact, quite often it does the opposite. It gives you the cage. It gives the cage that you're in a name. And this is why personality models are so seductive. They make the self feel knowable. They make complexity feel manageable. And they turn a living, constructing, context responsive human being into a neat little category. The people love categories. They love them because categories reduce anxiety. They love them because categories create belonging. And they love them because categories allow us to say, it's just how I am. Which often means, please stop asking me to become more aware. That is the developmental danger. Personality labels can become socially acceptable excuses for low awareness. I'm just direct. No, you may be unaware of the impact of your response. I'm just conflict avoidant. No, you may be constructing discomfort as danger. Well, I'm just a perfectionist. No, you may be using control to protect identity. Well, I'm a helper. No, you just like to be needed. So what about I'm just passionate? No, you may be reactive and making it sound noble. And this is why constructive development theory takes a different route. CDT does not begin by asking, what type of person are you? It asks, what are you intending? What are you aware of? What choices are available? What response are you constructing? And underneath that, CDT looks at what I call cognitive intentions. Cognitive intentions are the habitual ways we direct our attention, process information, create meaning, and organize our response. They are not fixed personality traits. They are not little identity badges. They are cognitive preferences that may operate inside or outside awareness. And that distinction is useful because a preference outside awareness becomes a prison. A preference inside awareness can become a choice. For example, some people habitually move towards what they want. Others move away from what they fear. Some people seek options. Others seek procedures. Personally, I'm an options person. Some people attend to detail. Others attend to the global picture. Again, I don't do details very well. Some refer internally. Others look externally for validation, approval, evidence, or authority. Some may focus on self and some may focus on others. And if you're drawn to similarity or difference, how does that make you think in the moment? None of these are morally good or bad. The issue is not whether you have a preference. The issue is whether you are aware of the preference while it is constructing your response. That is where development begins. Because without awareness, these patterns run you. You do not choose them. You enact them. Then you call the result your personality. And that is the myth. Personality is often the story we tell after our cognitive habits have repeated themselves long enough to become familiar. We behave in a certain way across enough situations, and then we say, that is who I am. But CDT would ask, is it who you are? Or is it how you have learned to construct yourself? And more importantly, can you construct yourself differently when the context requires it? And that's the real test. Not whether you can identify your type, not whether you can describe your pattern, not whether you can nod along to a profile and feel temporarily understood. The real test is whether awareness gives you choice. Because if your so-called personality disappears the moment you develop awareness, then it was never destiny, if you want to use that word. It was just a habit. A person who says, I am just not good with conflict, may believe they are describing their personality, but CDT hears something else. Perhaps they are constructing conflict as a threat, and perhaps they are constructing disagreement as rejection. Or maybe they're constructing harmony as safety. Perhaps they're constructing their own value through being liked. Or maybe they're unaware that their avoidance is not kindness, but it's fear with polite manners. That is a very different lens, because now we are not trapped inside the label. We can examine the construction. The same applies to someone who says, I am a natural leader. That sounds really strong. It sounds really confident and impressive. But CDT might ask, what are you constructing as leadership? Are you constructing leadership as control? Maybe you've got visibility, authority, performance, rescue. Maybe you just want to be dominant. And we'll probably do a section on the alpha male in another episode. Maybe it's about responsibility or as service, as the capacity to hold complexity on behalf of others. A person can be labeled a leader while still constructing leadership from ego, fear, image, or a need to be followed. So again, the label tells us very little. The construction tells us far more. This is why I'm suspicious of personality models when they become identity systems. They may be useful as starting points. They may provide language or reveal patterns, and they may help people to begin to reflect. But if they stop at classification, they become developmental cul-de-sacs. People go in, find a label, feel understood, and never come out. They mistake recognition for transformation, and the market loves this. Of course it does. Personality sells. Self-recognition sells. And types sell. MBTI, for example. Badges, profiles. People love being told who they are, especially when the description is flattering enough to feel insightful and vague enough to feel accurate. You might be aware of the Barnum effect. You are deeply intuitive, but sometimes misunderstood. Or you care about others, but need time alone. You are ambitious, but value authenticity. You are sensitive to criticism, but have great potential. Of course you are. So is nearly everyone else with a nervous system and a LinkedIn account. The problem is not that all of this is useless. The problem is that it often does not go far enough. It describes the surface of repeated behavior without getting underneath to the architecture of construction. CDT is interested in that architecture. It asks, how do you build your reality? How do you attend to it? What do you ignore? What do you privilege? What do you avoid? And what do you construct as evidence? What do you construct as success? And what do you construct as self? And crucially, are you aware of any of this while it is happening? Because if you're not, then your thinking style is thinking you. Now that's an uncomfortable idea. You may not be using your thinking may be using you. Your cognitive intentions may be organizing your response before awareness has arrived. Your attention may already have selected the evidence. Your motivation may already have shaped the goal. And your sense of self may already have decided what must be defended. Your need for certainty may already have shut down the question. And then you arrive afterwards with a beautiful explanation. That is not deliberate thinking. That is unconscious construction with a press release. The aim of CDT is not to destroy personality language completely. It's to put it in its place. Personality may describe tendencies. Thinking style reveals construction. Cognitive intentions reveal the building blocks. Awareness determines whether those building blocks are automatic or available for choice. That is the shift. At lower awareness, we are embedded in our thinking style. We are inside the pattern and we mistake it for self. At the higher levels of awareness, we can observe the pattern, we can notice the pull, and we can see the tendency. We can choose whether it fits the context. That is development. Not becoming a better version of your type, not finding a more accurate label or upgrading from one personality system to another, but becoming aware enough that no label can fully contain you. This is why the myth of personality is so limiting. It suggests that the task is to discover who you are. CDT suggests the task is to become aware of how you are constructing who you are. And that is far more demanding because once you see the construction, you lose the comfort of inevitability. You cannot keep saying, this is just my personality, not honestly anyway. You may still have tendencies, you may still have preferences, and you may still have patterns that are strong, old, familiar, and difficult to shift, but they are no longer sacred. They are no longer the truth of you. They are material. And awareness allows you to work with the material. That is where the choice appears. You can be naturally detail focused and still choose to think globally. You can prefer options and still choose procedure when the context requires it. You can feel the pull of external approval and still choose internal reference. You can notice your desire to avoid conflict and still choose a difficult conversation. And then you can feel the need to be right and still choose curiosity. This is not personality change in the shallow sense. This is increased developmental freedom. And this is where we need to be careful. CDT is not saying you can become anything at any moment. That would be nonsense. You are embodied, social, historical, emotional, contextual beings. We have our habits, we have histories, and we have nervous systems. We have our wounds and patterns that took years to form. But we also have awareness. And where awareness increases, choice increases. Where choice increases, response changes. Where response changes, the self is reconstructed. And that is the work. It's not to find your type or to worship your traits, not to turn your limitations into a brand, but to become aware of the cognition and the cognitive construction beneath the behavior. So here is the question for this episode. What parts of your personality are actually just unexamined habits? What labels have you become loyal to? What descriptions of yourself have you quietly become excuses? And where do you say, this is just who I am, when the more honest sentence might be, that is who I become when I am not aware? Because that is the line, that is the bite. You are not a type, you are not a profile. You are not your repeated behavior. You are not the label that made you feel understood. You are a constructing organism using habitual cognitive intentions to build a self, a context, and a response in the moment. And the more aware you become of that construction, the less imprisoned you are by personality. This is thinking deliberately. And today's uncomfortable thought is this. Your personality may not be who you are. It may simply be the pattern you have not yet become aware enough to choose beyond. Thank you.